Do your children go to school in Melbourne? Are you interested in how their school might be shaping them for the future? I'm Crystal, a regular Melbourne mum interested in all things to do with schools. In this podcast, I want to talk to the people in the education system in Melbourne, including parents, students, and maybe even some principals to get a better understanding of what goes on in schools and how they're shaping our kids. It's time to go to school on the Melbourne Schools podcast. Hi parents, welcome to the first Melbourne Schools podcast for 2025. To kick off 2025, I have a very special guest joining me, Daniel Cash. Daniel is a recent high school graduate, but he's already making waves as a passionate advocate, an opinionated writer, and an articulate Gen Z spokesperson. Daniel graduated as Melbourne Grammar's school captain in 2023. I first came across him when I read his powerful opinion piece in The Age called I'm Melbourne Grammar school captain and I'm gay. The Presbyterian Church would have me sacked. Needless to say, it left a big impact on me. Since then, I've made it a point to read Daniel's articles in The Age as they're so thoughtful and well written. If you're interested, you can look him up. I'm super excited to chat to him today. Hello, Daniel.
G'day, Crystal. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Oh, no, thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy person, so thanks for making the time.
Not at all.
So before we chat about Melbourne Grammar, I'd love to know what you're doing these days with your life.
Awesome. So I'm in my second year of university. I'm up at the ANU in Canberra studying a double degree of law and international relations, which is really interesting.
Yep.
And ANU has actually been in the headlines quite a bit lately because it's going through tough times financially.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
So, okay.
So, that's not something I, counted on when I first made my decision. It seems you can't really tell too much from a student perspective. So I'm enjoying that.
Okay.
I'm working for a communications company called Encore as an associate, which is really fascinating. And in exciting news, as you've mentioned, I've been writing for newspapers, including The Age,
yes,
Sydney Morning Herald.
You're a regular contributor to The Age, I see.
Yeah, which is such a great opportunity.
That's amazing.
Thank you. It's been so thrilling. And then off the back of that, this year, through Encore, we're launching a podcast called Gen Z Explained, pitched at an audience of parents, teachers, managers of Gen Z, endeavouring to explain everything there is to know about my, anxious, stressed, overstimulated,
lazy generation.
And each episode, I and my boss, who's 30, so she's a millennial, Jessie Wu, we go over a topic, whether it be Gen Z in the workplace or what it's like growing up with social media. And so I'm really excited for the first 3 episodes of that to come out soon.
Wow. Gosh, you're doing everything. Writing, podcasting, studying, working. Gosh, where do you find the time?
Allegedly studying.
Yeah, I know how it is at university. That sounds amazing. So speaking of Melbourne Grammar, so you've been graduated for 2 years now, is that right?
Yep.
How long were you at Melbourne Grammar for?
All the way through, so from prep.
Oh, wow. So from prep to year 12?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So the primary school is called Grimwade, that's right.
That's co-ed. And then all boys from 7 to 12. And that's different campus then.
Yeah. And do you know how your parents chose Melbourne Grammar?
We lived close by.
Oh, right. And is that it?
I think that was it. I don't have to add to their work commute.
Right. Do you have siblings at the school as well or no?
I have 2 older sisters, so they went through Grimwade. And so that's why we'd actually then moved somewhere else by the time I was entering. So our original reason was no longer. Oh, right. But we were having such a great time there.
Yeah. Okay. Where did your sisters end up going?
To Melbourne Girls Grammar.
Oh, radio. So that's kind of the sister school
of
Melbourne Grammar. Okay. So how did you find your time there? Like we hear, I think as parents, well, yeah, as parents, we hear a lot about, boys' schools and what they're like and single sex education. Like what was your experience like there? Because going from a primary school that was co-ed to a boys' environment only, how did you find that?
I found it, and I look back at my time with almost continued shock that it was this great, with
Oh.
so much fondness, because I know school isn't always easy for people, and it's got
Mm-hmm.
its ups and downs. But I thought it was a remarkably uh, a place where everyone could thrive. I think people were genuinely valued, whether they were sporty or academic or into drama or all three of that or none of that. I
Mm-hmm.
think people were valued. I think it was a very sensitive environment.
Mm-hmm.
I think the staff really encouraged that. And then in the cohort of students, um, there was a softness or a sort of receptiveness to people being different. And
Mm.
so going from a co ed environment up to year six, then into all boys from year seven onwards, wasn't too big a leap.
Okay.
I think because there was this sort of sensitivity and emotional intelligence that I sort of found in
All
maybe
the way through.
yeah, and I think maybe I just had a
Mm.
really good cohort, or who knows. Um,
Mm.
and then from year seven onwards, Melbourne Girls Grammar is just around the corner,
Right.
and so there are sometimes activities that are done together. So yeah, yeah.
Hmm. I wonder how. Yeah, I wonder. Do you think it was just like luck? Do you think your cohort, or like, do you think the teachers had that sort of culture as well of being like emotionally intelligent and sensitive? And how do you think that gets created in a culture?
I think it's definitely a system's only as good as the people that are in it. So
Hmm.
I can only speak to my cohort, but I think
Yeah.
the staff enacted structures that really brought that out in the students. So in senior school, for example, there are various committees, the science committee, or the bushwalking society who plan their own bushwalks, and so these are things that go on even though students will leave the school. These structures remain in place, which
Hmm.
encourage kids to have different passions and that ensure that there's not just one mold that fits in,
Hmm.
is emphasized at the school. So I think it's probably also institutional.
Okay. So are they clubs that you just mentioned,
Yeah, I
or are they?
suppose so. They call them committees, and
Oh, right.
different
Okay.
kids run them, but basically clubs. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so there were a lot of like different kinds of like clubs and
yeah,
extracurriculars.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Because I hear, I get the impression, I suppose, that Melbourne Grammar is quite an academic school.
yeah.
Um, and if I remember correctly, you've got to sit an exam to get in. Is that right?
I think because I was
Oh, because yeah,
taking
we went
prep, I
from.
was through, but I think if you're entering at year seven, you do, and same for year nine.
Yeah, yeah. So once you're in there, do you feel like the culture is still quite academic, or would it be, what would be the predominant? Because I know some schools are, have a very academic culture, or there's a very sporty sort of culture. Like, what would you say Melbourne Grammar is?
So I think there is like the hallmarks of an academic school, for
Mm.
example. I think from maybe second semester in year eight or maybe year nine,
Hmm.
we're already doing exams so that we can um, come to terms with the process of revision for exams and then sitting an exam and stuff. So there are all these things that the school does that are
Mm.
very academic that prepare us so well, and we're very fortunate for that.
Mm.
Equally, I think it was an environment, especially in earlier years, where learning was really fun and something that was um, taught in a sort of jovial way. So
Okay.
I think when you give a dog medicine, you put peanut butter over the pill. I think the
Yeah.
school did a very good job
Okay.
It ended up being a very fun sort of environment.
Oh, okay. So they sugar-coated the learning. Is that
Well,
what you're
without taking anything away from the learning.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. That's a good way to describe it.
yeah,
Okay. Well, I guess that's a good thing, isn't it? Like, I mean, to
yeah,
make it, fun and enjoyable. I
yeah.
mean, learning
Like
should be.
I look back on the primary school, for example,
Yeah.
and just I think I really enjoyed it. I was, extended where I needed to
Mm.
be, all
Mm-hmm.
this sort of stuff. And then I realized that was very academic, but at the time it
Mm.
didn't feel
It didn't feel
intense
like it.
or yeah, yeah, yeah. Or it just
Y-
didn't feel too much. Yeah,
Yep. Yep. That's interesting. I mean, they must be doing something right or
yeah,
well, because I know that Melbourne Grammar does really well
yeah,
academically,
yeah,
in terms of VCE.
yeah.
There's no IB at the school, is there? It's just
No.
VCE. Okay.
I
Did you?
think sorry to interrupt. I think
Yeah,
the
that's okay.
staff and the teaching staff have a naturally and obviously a massive role there. And coming
Mm,
to university, it cast into light just how lucky I was to go to the school because at university, your professors or lecturers don't know your name and
yes.
you don't have the relational and quite close
Mm-hmm.
environments that I had at Melbourne Grammar. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized, wow, my teachers were so conscientious,
Yeah.
so caring. They knew so much about you um, as a person and as a student. And I think that the role they had can't be overstated.
Mm. Do you think that that has put you at a disadvantage at uni though? Like to have to be used to that sort of attention, and some people say that it's like being spoon-fed in private school. And then sometimes people go into a bit of shock when they get to uni and they realize, oh gosh, the lecturer doesn't even know who I am. Do you think that that puts you at a disadvantage, or like, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Not really, because I think that while we had this attention and great care from
Mm-hmm.
the teachers, it wasn't being spoon fed, it was rather being taught
Nurtured?
very, yeah, nurtured and
Hmm.
given the reins to an active sort of um, way of living and way of learning. So that I think when I came out of the Melbourne Grammar system, I was vested with uh, a sort of learning style that was super active, where I could, read in an analytical and selective way, where
Mm.
I could
Mhm.
listen to someone lecturing when I came to uni, for example, and pick up on the right things, where I could think for myself. I was a
Mm.
humanities focused student, so I think I got that especially from school, the complete opposite of spoon feeding. Um,
Okay.
so I think it made me really well placed for uni, which is a much more independent and you sink or swim type of environment, because
Yes.
I think I was able to do that. And, the only negative would be that I just came from this wonderful environment where, you could email someone on a Sunday and they'd reply,
Mm.
right?
Oh,
Whereas
really?
that's not the case for uni. Um,
Yes.
and so but that's not to the school's detriment.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear this argument a lot, and I'm in two minds about it, because I can see where people are coming from. Because if you come from a very nurturing environment, you might get a bit of a shock, like when
Yeah,
you get sort of tossed into the real world.
yeah,
But I think it is good that you do get a good foundation to start with. Like when you
yeah,
are like young, you get taught and nurtured well. I think there is something to be said about that
yeah.
as well. Yeah, so that's interesting. Um, with the school, so do you think that, I mean, is there sort of like a sporty culture as well?
Yeah, and
Hmm.
I think um, to my point earlier, I think well, I'll give you an example. In our year 12, we
Mm-hmm.
reintroduced the House Cup, which was
Okay.
a competition that used to exist between the various houses in the school. Um, and the competitions that we had that contributed to the House Cup were sporting competitions, athletics, whatever, but
Mm.
also then, the yearly theatre sports competition
Mm.
or a writing competition, music competition, that sort of thing. And so it was a very balanced overall scoreboard of various aspects of school life contributing to the overall house that would win. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's a good way of introducing the fact that the school is really sporty. has a great sports program. I
Mm.
really loved that all throughout my time there.
Mm.
But I don't, not in an exclusive way, and I don't think
Yeah.
crowds out other aspects of school life. I'm conscious that schools like Melbourne Grammar in the past um, have been very, rah rah, sporty schools. There's the old Barry Humphries, who was Dame Edna, went to
Yes.
Melbourne Grammar, and
Oh, did he?
I don't know if he had the best time because he wasn't a very sporty kid. Um, and
Yes.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But equally, I've spoken to old students who weren't sporty and they loved it. So I don't know, I
Okay.
might be giving it a tough rap. But these days, I think it's got its emphasis on sport
Mm.
without outshining anything else.
Right, right. So you don't have to be a very sporty kid to excel at Melbourne Grammar, would you say?
No way. And I
Really? Okay.
noticed that all throughout and thought,
Okay.
I think, the Wednesday assembly, the
Mm.
captain of the football team might get up and talk about their victory on the weekend,
Mm.
and he will get the exact same volume and length of applause that the uh, head of the symphony orchestra will get
Oh,
when
wow.
he comes and
Okay.
talks about their tour they did recently, or their
Mm.
spring performance. And I remember always thinking, I think that's really wonderful. And it's not something that a school can direct. It's the students who are showing their appreciation, and it seems
Mm.
quite evenly spread.
Mm. Were you a sporty kid?
I enjoyed my sport. I
Mm-hmm.
really like swimming,
Mm-hmm.
water polo. I
Mm-hmm.
played football, though I don't think I, got close to the ball very often. But I enjoyed myself. So yeah, I engaged quite a bit with the sport. Yeah,
Yeah, I think a lot of parents of boys who are less sporty do worry in
yeah,
that environment, like
yeah,
putting them in a boys' school, because I know that some people might perceive it as a very sort of masculine and toxic masculinity environment. People do worry about that,
Mm.
but it doesn't sound like it from what you described.
I thought it was really. I understand I'm sounding like a walking advertisement, um, but I think I corroborate this with my friends and peers' experiences.
Hmm.
That I think there was this wonderful, and in that first article I wrote, which you very kindly mentioned,
Mm.
there was this wonderful expression of masculinity at the school, which was, in a very boyish way, super accepting.
Mm.
Say that kid isn't good at cricket and he might be gay, you know, people don't really care.
Right.
Yeah, they like them for who they are and they judge
Yes.
them. I think it's very Australian and very meritocratic in that, I might not like that kid, but it's because of, he's annoying me in other ways, right? But, if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, I think that could put a lot of parents at ease because I see that question come up a lot.
Yeah.
Are all boys schools, the culture at all boys schools, what is it like? And similar with all girls schools. Like, I mean, is it a detrimental environment as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think sport is a great way to make friends and to,
Mm-hmm.
especially among young boys, it's an easy way to find respect and admiration among your
Yeah.
peers. But I think from my experience, and as I've said, equally, if you're musical or
Mm.
theatrical or really good at French or something, I think,
Mm-hmm.
at least from my school, there's a crowd that admires that and there's, broad respect among.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it comes from humility, and I don't know how that is taught. I think that's something
Mm.
you have or you don't,
Mm-hmm.
because it might be the fact that a kid who's good at athletics might think that's great that I'm good at athletics, but gosh, I really admire the kid who's great on the saxophone because I could never
Mm.
even begin to approach that. So
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep. It sounds like there's that kind of respect
Yeah,
for differences in people.
yeah,
Yeah, that sounds pretty amazing.
yeah,
um, with the other thing that parents I think worry about is with schools like Melbourne Grammar, because I mean, I think everybody knows that it's not a cheap place to go. Is there a sense of like elitism, especially with kids who get scholarships into the school and aren't particularly wealthy? Do you think that there's a bit of a divide or anything like that happens, or would you even know that the kids are on scholarships or?
Um, I never really knew who was on a scholarship or not. I
Mm-hmm.
know that so in year seven, there's a big intake going to the new campus of kids from Grimwade who had been at the school from prep, and then kids who had come from other schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that for the kids who came from Grimwade, um, that was their first time then going to school with people who had been often at a public school for their primary
Mm.
education.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, it's two different sort of environments feeding in.
Mm.
Um, I don't, and again, maybe I'm looking through rose tinted glasses. I had a great time. I didn't really
Yeah.
notice elitism again because I think there are great structural elements in place in that service learning was a big emphasis at the school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, through the houses or through volunteering or through
Oh,
committees
really?
where
Okay.
you could work in charities or services. Maybe every third Wednesday you go to Carlton because the school has a partnership with, um, I can't remember what the name was, but it was a breakfast service that kids would
Oh, really? So is that
set up.
part of like the school system? Is that like a club or something like that?
Yeah, so the houses each have their own services that they do. That it's called
Mm.
service learning that the students can be involved in, and
Mm-hmm.
then um, there was a committee I was involved with called the Values in Action Committee, where you can do all sorts of stuff like that as well. Whether it be, like I say, three times a term, or then there was a yearly trip to Vietnam, which the students would fundraise for by doing sausage sizzles at school and whatever. Then they'd go
Wow.
over and they would, do whatever. I think it was different every time. I remember one year
Mm.
they helped build part of a new school, stuff like that. So
Mm.
I think there was a real emphasis on, there's no getting around the fact that it's the height of good fortune to go to a school
Mm.
like Melbourne
Mm-hmm.
Grammar. But I
Yes.
think there was a really quite persistent and constant consciousness that, wow, we have this amazing opportunity. There are things we should be doing to keep a perspective on the fact that we're so lucky to go here,
Mm-hmm.
and b give back and actually be part of the community at
Mm-hmm.
large. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember one of the things we spoke about was that service isn't a transactional thing, but it's a relational thing, and that from engaging in service learning, it's not just the people we're helping or working with that are getting something out of it, it's us as
Mm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And often maybe us more so because we're learning, we're hearing from backgrounds that we haven't been exposed to and that sort of thing. Um,
Mm.
I wasn't, however, um, on a scholarship. I was there from prep, so I can't
Mm-hmm.
speak to how it would feel to come from
Mm.
different background.
Mm.
So I don't know, but I thought the school did a good job of keeping that in check. Uh,
Mm.
but then there are lots of people there who come from backgrounds with lots and lots and lots of money. So
Mm-hmm. I can imagine.
only so much a school can do.
Mm.
And I especially remember that at primary school because when you're growing up and you're six and you come to be picked up and all the cars are fancy cars, you think
Mm.
that's normal.
Yes.
Um, and I remember thinking, God, what's wrong with our car if it's not a Porsche? Um,
Yeah, it's a bit of a distorted view, I
yeah,
think.
yeah. And I thought
Yeah.
we must be inferior, but you grow up and realize that's not the case. And I think the
Mm.
school does a very good job, and all it can do as a school to ameliorate that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I also came from a fancy school. My parents put me into a fancy school. When I was a kid and having no perspective on the outside world, I also thought that was normal.
Yeah,
But because I thought that was normal, I didn't think of anything of it.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and now I look back and go, oh, my friend was really wealthy,
Yeah,
but I didn't realize it at the time, and I didn't care. Like nobody
yeah.
cared.
I think I was also protected from it well because for my family it was quite a sacrifice to send me to the school, and
Hmm.
my parents are very unpretentious people who scoff at any
Wealth.
sort of pretense. But yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Yes.
I was always aware
Mm.
of that through them,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
and poke fun at things, but whatever. But yeah,
Yeah, it's part of your upbringing as well, I
yeah.
think. Is it a big school actually? Like I don't actually know how big it is. Do you know how many students there are?
I think there would be maybe, as a guess, maybe 1,000 in total across the campuses. The senior school is years 9 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are about 200 kids a year, so that's 800.
Oh
Maybe
wow.
maybe it's
Okay.
more like 1,500 then, and then the middle
Okay.
school is years 7 and 8, and that's probably 170 per year.
Mm. Okay.
And then
So it's actually quite large. Yeah.
yeah, pretty large, but because
Thinking
it's
about
in
it. Yep.
three sections, it doesn't feel too big.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So they're actually on different campuses.
Yes, the years 7 to 12 are on the same campus, but
Mm.
there's an oval in between,
Oh, radio.
so they do feel they're their own.
Separated.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep. Okay. Is there any like you were talking about that program where the kids go to Vietnam? Is there any other like special extracurricular stuff like that? Because I know some schools like have an off-site year 9 program and that sort of
yeah.
thing. Does Melbourne Grammar do anything like that?
So there are trips that happen. I think for there's a cricket trip maybe. If
If you're in the
I
team.
don't know the logistics of it. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Um, there's a Latin or classics trip. Again, I don't really know how these things work.
Okay. Yep.
Um, Lots of it for me was during COVID, so they weren't
Oh, okay. You missed out.
didn't happen. Yeah,
Mm.
but then in year 10, there's the sort of flagship outdoor education
Okay.
called Beyond the Gates, which is
Uh-huh.
a it was modified for me because we were coming out of COVID, but I think it's usually a 3 week camping trip, including a 48-hour period where you're on your own.
Yeah,
Um,
solo. Yeah, solo
yeah,
camping.
solo, and
Mm.
then so for me that was a 24-hour period, and it's
Mm.
this time when for lots of students they have epiphanies and revelations and find themselves. I just got very bored and ate all my food too early.
I can relate.
So there's that happens every year as well. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's a year 10 thing.
yeah. There are
Yep.
other camps and other
Yeah.
events, but that's the main one.
Okay. Interesting. Can you talk a bit about the leadership there? Like, what did you think? I mean, obviously you got elected as the school captain, so I think that says something a little bit about the leadership as well. But can you talk about like the school principal? Did you have much to do with him as school captain?
Yeah. So the principal is Philip Grutzner.
Mm.
He actually went to the school.
Oh,
He's the first principal to have been to the school, and it
cool.
really shows in his affection, and he's very compassionate about the school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the deputy principal and the head of the senior school, uh, Ben Hainish, and then there is the head of students, Jeff Guggenheimer. So they're the three sort of uh, leaders who I liaised with most often. Then there's
Mm-hmm.
also others who are on the executive, like the head of learning and development and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then I think there's a school board, which is more operational. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a ton to do with them. But
Mm-hmm.
so those three I mentioned were the ones that me and the vice captains and I
Mm-hmm.
worked with the most,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty closely. Like we'd have a meeting every week,
Mm-hmm.
and those three often would speak to the students every week at an assembly. So they're very much in the forefront. Um, they had different sort of roles in that Mr. Guggenheimer, who was the head of students, was very pastoral. He'd help and have oversight over lots of events and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
organising events. Mr. Hainish, who was the head of senior school, had quite a wide remit, and then Mr. Grutzner, the principal, was similar to Mr. Hainish, but perhaps a bit more. You know, he also had other campuses to be thinking about. So I worked quite closely with them. I was always amazed by how good a barometer they had for the students and the staff. They often, especially because I'm quite energetic and often coming up with ideas and stuff, the poor guys always had to be saying no to me because this would be too expensive, this would be a health and safety risk, whatever. So they managed to be able to do that while staying open-minded and saying yes to stuff that they could do.
Yeah.
They gave remarkable leeway for student leadership. So in my year, we came up with an idea with the house captains and the vice captains to do the big freeze, which a la the AFL. I don't know if you know, but I don't know if it's like round 9 or maybe round 18 in the AFL. There's a big freeze where they have an inflatable slide that they get celebrities to go down, and then they land in a bucket of ice and ice water, and they do it to raise money for motor neuron disease.
Oh, yes, yes. Yep.
I think Neil Danaher, who started it, won
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do know a little bit about that. Yes.
So we did our own, and we hired
cool.
inflatable slide and teachers to go down, and we raised money for MND that way. And that was, our idea.
Yeah.
And they would have been a headache for them because they had to help, make sure no one fell off the slide and whatever.
Got hypothermia.
Yeah, totally. And they were really up for stuff like that. So I thought that was really fantastic.
Yeah, I actually think that's really important. That you feel like you have a say in how things, what gets done and how things are done. I think because you're school captain as well, you probably have a little bit more sway than some of the other kids there. But do you think there are leadership opportunities available throughout? For people who possibly aren't as, well spoken and popular. Do you think that there are?
You're making assumptions. Yeah, definitely. So I think, again, to the structures, there are different areas where you can be a leader. So there were the committees where you can be the head of a committee. There were the houses where you could be the house captain or a house vice captain. And then there were other things. So you could be the captain of the sport, whether that be swimming to football to European handball or whatever. And then also there are stuff like music had its own. There was the captain of the symphony, for example. So there were lots of different areas to do that. And equally, I really like this about the school. All the year 12s, they wore a white shirt. And that was supposed to mean that every kid in year 12 is a leader. It used to be in the olden days of the school that the prefects, which are no longer a thing, had white shirts. And I think it might have been Jeff Guggenheimer's idea to say, well, let's have all the year 12s have white shirts because they are, themselves
the leaders.
So I think there definitely were different ways you could lead. But then equally, and I saw this throughout year 12, that kids who maybe didn't have a position would come up with an idea and feel very comfortable to go pitch it to one of the leaders or through us, and it would eventuate. So,
why do you think that you were elected as a leader? Why do you think? What do they?
Good looks.
Of course. Other than that, was there anything else?
I don't know, because I think it was a great year level, and there were tons of people who would have done a good job. Um, I
But
think
what like sort of values do you think that they would? I mean, what sort of like characteristics would they have valued in you? Do you reckon that they picked you as the school captain? Because there must be some reasons.
I think I um, made an effort to engage with the school, like in a lot of ways.
Mm.
Um, I'm not musical at all. I'm borderline tone deaf. Uh, but you'll find this funny. I found myself conducting the orchestra
What?
for one small moment. There's a postmodern uh, composer called John Cage, who one of his, I don't even know the term because it's, you don't say song. I don't know what it's called. One of his works, his pieces,
Pieces?
was
Pieces.
4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. And the whole idea is that the audience's coughs and stuff become the noise and the music, and it's
Uh-huh.
meant to be self-referential. So they got me to conduct that. So I came out in a tie and held my sticks up, batons, I don't know,
For
and
4 minutes.
we stood there for 43 minutes. Yeah, I think I somehow managed to engage with the school quite widely, which they appreciate. I
Mm-hmm.
think the role of the school captain at my school is to help be a conduit between those leaders and the students. So I
Mm-hmm.
think they appreciate someone who can relay messages frankly and
Mm-hmm.
filter what needs to be filtered through. Um, yeah,
Mm. I normally wouldn't bring this up, but because you broadcasted in your first article in the Age. I mean, you are gay as well, and I think that says something about the school that they're happy to. It didn't matter at all, and I know as your article mentioned, sometimes it does matter. Like,
yeah,
in other
yeah.
places it does. Whereas at Melbourne Grammar, a place where people worry about, toxic masculinity and elitism and this and that, it didn't matter. And I think that says something.
I got it was such a great reception from that article, and got lots of messages from people from other schools
Mm,
who said they wouldn't feel safe or confident to do that.
yeah.
And it's such a testament to the school. The school had, before me, plenty of student leaders who were openly gay, so it wasn't a big deal.
Right. Okay.
So they're very ahead of their time, even then,
Mm,
which was really impressive.
mm-hmm.
You mentioned the term toxic masculinity
Mm-hmm.
as something that people might be worried about with this
Yes.
school. I often thought that was it's because it's definitely an assumption. I often thought that was
Mm,
an unfair one because it's a well-known school. It's an old school. It's a private school. So
mm-hmm.
there is that. The Herald Sun likes to write about.
That perception.
Yeah, there is that perception, and being on the
Yes.
inside,
Yes.
it's also known as a conservative school. But being on
Yep.
the inside, I've found it remarkably progressive, open,
Mm,
warm. I think it really just struck the right tone in terms of balancing sensitivity with masculinity.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, and that article that I wrote really brought that to life. Like I remember, um, I think the Age had posted it on their TikTok or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking through the comments to see if anyone else was looking, and
Oh gosh, yep.
someone had
Yeah.
some like random had said something critical,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I saw these people like defending me, and they were these year nines, very laddie sort of rat bag year nines, because I clicked on their profile, I recognized them, and they were saying,
Oh, from the school?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
They were sort of the caricature of boyishness, and
yes.
they were calling whoever this person was out. So if people like that are, then the
Yeah.
rest of the cohort, and they must be in a good place. So
Yeah.
I thought it was wonderful.
It was an amazing article.
Thank you,
I shared it in the group when it came out.
thank you.
Obviously had no idea who you were. But then I also realized after just having a look at all the articles that you'd written recently that I came across a TikTok that you had made and it left an impression. I was going to share that in the group too. I didn't know it was you. About ATARs. and what
Oh yeah,
people were
yeah.
doing now. That was so cool.
Thank you. It was mortifying to
Ask.
context for the viewers and listeners. I helped for the Age make a TikTok around because I'd written an article around the time of the VCE results,
Yes.
and I helped make a TikTok asking people in the CBD in Melbourne what their ATAR was and what they now do for work or something
That's
like
such
that.
a great idea because I often wonder that too. I was actually taking inspiration from you, and I was going to ask the group. I never did it, but I was going to
Yeah,
ask the parents in the group, like, what was your ATAR and what are you doing now? Because I mean, you find that there is no correlation
yeah.
after a
And
while.
I don't know if you had a look through the comments of that video, but it was great. People sort of used it as this place to share their ATAR
Mm.
and where they've ended up. And so often it is in the video, there's a Supreme Court judge
Yes, I
who,
remember her. Yeah.
you'd think you'd need a perfect score to do that, but she said she maybe got an 80. I
Yes.
don't know, which is still
Yeah.
a pretty great score. But
Mm.
yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Good on you.
I say
Yeah.
mortifying because I had to go and tap people on the shoulder.
And ask them about their ATAR.
I'm doing this, and I thought, if someone asked me, I'd say, hell no.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling up for it. But people were very generous and happy to chat.
Yeah, yeah, no, I thought that was really impactful.
Thanks.
Yeah, it obviously, yeah, I still remember it and I didn't know it was the same person who'd written that article and did the TikTok. Okay, so back to Melbourne Grammar. Was there anything that you didn't like about the school? Like anything that you could think that they could improve or um
I I'm I promise you, I'm giving a fair-minded view. Just my
I know you
thoughts.
had a great time.
Maybe like we've touched on in primary school, but I don't
Mm,
think this is anything the school can do.
mm-hmm.
Just that it was in primary school, especially an environment with lots of people with lots of money, and
Mm,
that's not a um, accurate, you know, reflection of what life is like. And
yes.
growing up, you do have
Yep.
the perspective a bit twisted, but
Mm-hmm.
equally, I think by coming into year seven in the senior school,
Mm.
it sort of mellows out.
Mm.
But I don't think that's anything the school can do. Um,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
uh, I don't know. No, don't really have anything.
No, no, I.
It's apathetic.
You had the
Love this
perfect
so much.
experience. Oh, but that's amazing to hear you say though. To that you had such a great experience. Yeah, no, that's a real testament to the school. A couple more questions. Firstly, how do you think your education has helped you so far in
Um,
life?
so I was, like I say, towards the end, quite humanities focused.
Mm-hmm.
For VCA, I did classics, philosophy, Latin,
Wow.
history of revolutions, English, and English literature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Amazing that those subjects were on offer.
Mm.
Um, and so I think it has so far served me so well because, for example, I would never be able to read Shakespeare just on my own, right?
Mm.
Or even Pride and Prejudice or something by Jane Austen. I remember reading that in the summer holidays before my class on it and thinking, this is, what is this? And then I had the absolute pleasure of having that taught to me and explained to me in
Mm.
such a way that I had my eyes open to these parts of literature and art, such that I can then take that skill set of analyzing a work and next time I'm reading something, apply it.
Mm.
So I think it set me up really well, especially with studying law and doing a bit of writing,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
really transferable skills. Um, and then the leadership opportunities have been a great way to hone communication,
Yes.
and working for a communications firm and doing writing. I think the strength that I'm still trying to work on is articulating a message and helping the perception of a narrative. And so I think what I learned at school is really helpful for that.
Mm.
Um, and socially, it brought me really great friends who I'm still in contact with and hang out with. And
Mm.
even, teachers I'll catch up with.
Really
I'm back in Melbourne. I'll come by and visit the school. So yeah, yeah.
awesome. What do you think you're going to be doing down the track? Like, do you think you'll be a lawyer? And
Well, definitely not. That's too hard work.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm interested in the media. I'm interested in politics.
Right.
But I firmly believe that you should probably go and live your life and do something in the real world before involving yourself with that. And the industry that I started working in, the communications industry, which is sort of media adjacent, is really interesting as well. So I don't know, but I think a law degree is a good degree to have.
Yeah, definitely.
A good way to have a lens through which to view the world, and same with IR. So yeah, the jury is out.
Sounds like the world is your oyster, Daniel.
Well, hopefully there's a pearl in it.
Hopefully. Is there anything that I have missed that you would like to say about your school or anything else?
No, don't think so.
No? All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much for your time and spending the time chatting to me. I've loved hearing your experience, and I've loved to meet you, actually. Yeah, it's been lovely.
Thank you, Crystal. Much appreciated, and thank you for the opportunity to chat with you.
No worries. Thank you, Daniel. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for joining me on this podcast. Remember that the content that you hear on this podcast is of a general nature and should not be used to make any decisions about schools or anything else. If you want to learn more about schools in Melbourne, make sure you visit the website www.melbourneschools.com.au. You can also join thousands of other parents in our community at Melbourne Schools Discussion Group on Facebook. See you there.